Our story is one of neighbors.
I don't pretend that it's going to be easy.
Don't let your anger turn into hatred. We know that hatred is like a fire. When it's allowed to grow, it will consume everything.
Hello, welcome back to Orange Wave, the series discussing progressive news, culture, and all things related to the NDP. I am your host, Will Adams, and today I'm joined by Victor Lau, a fascinating figure in Canadian politics. But before we dive in, a quick disclaimer, there's a portion of this interview where the audio cut out. It's nothing too bad, it was just Victor explaining who he is and me asking the first question, so I'll provide that context now. Victor has an unusual political journey. He was once the leader of the Saskatchewan Green Party and later ran as a candidate with the People's Party of Canada in 2019. Currently, he is an advocate for improving the Canada Disability Benefit. This wide-ranging political background gives him a unique perspective on the issues facing Canadians today. Right before the audio picks up, I asked Victor about what got him into politics in the first place. From there, he began discussing the types of demographics that tend to support Canada's major parties, specifically the Liberals and Conservatives. So when the interview starts, that's the context you'll hear him speaking on. Without further ado, let's get into my exclusive interview with Victor Lau.
You know, there's other people that are a little less wealthy, but they're kind of middle class. They usually vote Liberal. And then I said, well, so which way do we vote, Conservative or Liberal? And he says, we're working class. We vote NDP. And so then that's how I started voting NDP. And then when I went to university in 89, a long time ago now, over 30 years, I basically read up about the history of the NDP because I started the first environmental group at the University of Regina, and our table was right beside the Saskatchewan NDP youth. And so they were always coming over, checking out the stuff and trying to coax me to buy membership. And I said, look, guys, you know, I already vote for you. I don't want to get involved. I know you're the best of the worst. You know, let's leave it at that. And then, but, you know, over time, we all became friends. And very interesting thing I can tell you, Will. So this fellow that ran for youth leader, he wanted extra votes. So they convinced me, you know what, I was an anti-nuclear person. They said, how about you help us stop the party from going deep into uranium mining? So we'll sell you a membership. So I said, fine, okay, I'll take out membership. Let's get you elected and we'll make some noise. Well, the party establishment didn't want him in because he at the time, I don't know how he defined himself now because we're still friends, but he was a hard socialist. He really believed in the left cause. And so the party establishment, wanting more power than to be principal, they threw everything at him to stop him. And I was new, right? Remember, I'm only 1 year into the party, don't know anybody other than my small group of friends from the university, and it was shocking. I was watching the room when he lost the vote because it was a two-way race, and the adult organizer, the guy must have been in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. He's an adult, right?
Yeah. He
was jumping up and down, cheering the vote count, and I'm thinking, dude, aren't you supposed to be neutral? Like, what's this? Isn't the youth supposed to be having their say? So then, anyway, we're all drinking beers at the university, you know, kind of soaking in the loss, and they were talking about, how can we keep fighting in the party? I mean, the party obviously doesn't want left-wing politics, all that stuff. And the guys, one of the other organizer guys, the friend said, man, I only wish we had an opportunity, like one other shot. And my friend Guy, who ran, he said, yeah, well, they would expect me to run again. And I was just like basically humiliated, right? He got such a low vote or whatever. I don't want to do it again. And then I raised my hand, and I'm the newbie, right? And they said, what do you want, right? And I said, why don't I run? And then everybody laughed, right? Because remember, I'm only 1 year into this legacy party, but this other friend of mine, Jeff, who became my campaign manager, he says, no, wait, guys, this could work. And they're like, nobody knows him. And he goes, that's exactly why it'll work. We just got kicked in. They won't expect us to try and take back the youth leadership. And literally, we pulled it off. It was hilarious. We managed to become the youth leader on their 50th anniversary of the CCF victory in 1944. So, and then we did everything we could to try and push the party back to the left. But the party Party in Saskatchewan, if they ever were socialist, you can, and Will, you can check it out yourself. If the party, Saskatchewan NDP, they might still have their platform up on their website. If you read through it, and I read through it, it's only about 9 or 12 pages long. There's no radical socialism there, right? They don't talk about nationalization.
I mean, as someone who is a social democrat, Vic, I can tell you that the NDP, which is the party I align with, obviously, because my show is called Orange Wave,
For sure.
our party, one thing I can criticize us for is, I'm privy to the fact that we're very inconsistent when it comes to whether we're social democrats, socialists. Hell, sometimes we're neoliberals. Remember Tom Mulcair when he was leading the NDP? That man brought us to the center to the degree that we looked like a joke, and nowadays he just shills Pierre Poilievre. So that's like,
I know, that's shocking. Actually, I'm really. Well, I mean, it shouldn't be so shocking because if you know Tom Mulcair's history, he was a Quebec Liberal before he became national NDP leader, right?
Yeah.
So he was more to the center left or center right, depending how you define that, right?
Yeah.
I mean. The NDP, I mean, to survive, they've had to morph, right, from the CCF to the NDP, now to this kind of modern party trying to represent middle-class voters, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the trick, right? The working class, if they vote, it looks like they're going to vote in droves for Pierre Poilievre, which is terrifying, right? Because this guy is all about angry politics. He's got no solutions. It's just about taking power, right?
I know. I've seen his clips. Because, although I wasn't going to vote for Aaron, I couldn't have voted because I was 15, but I respected Aaron as a leader, and I think that if they ran Aaron, they would actually have a chance of winning. But, now that they're running Poilievre, who is a very extreme shift from even people like Stephen Harper, I don't think they're going to win.
Really? That's fascinating. So do you think the East and parts of Canada will just reject him because he's too extreme?
Well, provincially, politics can be more right-leaning, but federally, as like a whole, Canada is not that conservative, and it's too far of a shift too quickly. So I don't think it's
interesting. Yeah. I hope you're right. I mean, the ideal I was hoping, as a Green is some kind of minority. Like we know the Greens aren't going to form government. That's almost impossibility unless the world collapses and people are desperate. The NDP. Jug Me Sing, great guy, but I think they're just afraid of his background politics. I mean, that's kind of a racial thing. I think they're just not sure if they can put in a Sikh prime minister.
Unfortunately, in this country, still in 2024, being Sikh is not politically advantageous. Speaking of the fact that you are a Green, you used to be the Green Party leader, and leading a party like the Greens, especially in Saskatchewan, it must have had its fair share of moments where it got, rough and tumble. What would you say stands out as, like, the most defining moment for you leading the Saskatchewan Green Party?
Yeah, I think two things I could say right off the bat is, 2011, 2016, I was leader for 2 terms. Like, we ran our first full slate. So we built up from 1999 running in by-elections, went up to, 9 candidates in the next general election from there, and so on. And I think there was about, 5, 7. It took us about that many, between 5 and 7 consecutive general elections before, I think, 2011 and 2016, we broke through and managed to run a full slate. And we've never really looked back. So we know we can do it. The problem is now we have to get more financing. And I guess the second achievement, I think, and I think it really helped the diversity movement. We ran the first, I think, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, but in political history, anywhere in Canada, we ran the first open transsexual candidate.
Really?
The person, B. Garneau was her name. It was amazing. Because she happened to know my son, graduated together, and we're always looking for youth, right? Because we want youth involved in politics. Yeah. And we asked, hey, you know what? Whatever you want, right? We're just looking for someone to represent this area. Would you be willing to do it? And they said, so you're giving me freedom to talk about whatever issues. I said, as long as within the larger framework, you're not just, like a neo-Nazi or something really out of, far away from the I guess, the ecological wisdom of the Green Party, right? It's just, we're pretty open. And amazing. Like the senior reporter, I think he'd been there about 25 years for CBC. After he turned off the mic and the camera, he complimented our candidate. He says, I have never interviewed a premier, a cabinet minister, or an elected member that spoke more clearly than you just spoke. And you're telling me you're a first-time candidate? And she said, yeah, I'm just running to, represent. And I thought it was a great compliment. I mean, you don't usually get that. Reporters are pretty jaded, right? A lot of the politicians are kind of, I don't know, not slimy, but they're always trying to angle to get their point across. And I think that, I mean, all of us are trying to do that to make a win, but I think... Yeah,
it comes with the territory.
The Greens they're so new. We're still a little less, kind of motivated by power and still motivated by principle. But I mean, obviously, without getting seats, it's hard to move the needle or legislation. Once you have one or more seats, you can start kind of trying to put pressure on the system. So,
where's that candidate nowadays? What's she been up to?
Good question. I haven't checked. We asked them to run again. They declined, and we just haven't kept track. Right? They're still in the province, or maybe they moved on. Right? They got their. I know they were in the middle of transitioning, kind of thing. And so I should look up. Usually nowadays, if you can't find information, everyone goes to Facebook and see if people are posting their life story on there. So that'd be interesting.
Social media is a free resource.
Exactly.
So as someone from Saskatchewan, their most recent election, some are arguing that it set a clear message by keeping a very far-right party with Premier Scott Moe in power. What's your take on that? Why do you think the province is seemingly doubling down on conservatism?
Yeah, that's a great question, Will. I was thinking about that before the interview. And I've grown up here. I was born in Saskatchewan in 1970. My parents moved away about 17 years ago. When I got married, they decided to go to Calgary to help my brother get married, and they've stayed there. So they're involved in Alberta politics. Speaking as a kind of a prairie guy, I think what's happened is the right has entrenched such a strong message that the NDP can no longer be trusted with government. They've managed to now win 5 consecutive elections. They've tied, Premier Tommy Douglas. It's almost unheard of. I didn't think it would happen. A friend of mine, who's actually the NDP leader, Carla Beck, I thought, a miracle's a miracle. She's never lost. It's like she's got this really lucky horseshoe, and I thought maybe this will be the breakthrough. And they came so close. I was thinking if they're going to be short seats to form government, the NDP would only be short 5 or 7 seats. I was bang on. They were short 7 seats. And then looking at the breakdown, the 2 Moose Jaw seats should have went NDP. There was 2 seats remaining in Saskatoon that didn't go NDP. That would have been 4 more seats. All they needed was a small rump of rural seats. So I think the main message, is the NDP hasn't done enough of a good enough job to dispel, the right-wing propaganda. And so people are saying, we can no longer trust any other party. Then, the Sask party's got to remain in there. But enough people in the cities anyway are just sick and tired of them. I've heard the rural corruption is really deep. So that's, they're almost like threatening people, better not vote against us or there'll be repercussions. So, the rural people just got to get past that and throw the bums out, I guess. We'll see. Hopefully it'll happen sooner than 4 years.
Vic, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that Saskatchewan has rich natural resources, and as a Green, I'm sure you're privy to the fact that it's always a constant push and pull between economy and environment, especially recently. And a debate that at one point was John Kerry v. Big Oil has turned to a debate in Canada, at least, of East and West. Do you think that specific debate and that tension is pushing people toward people like Scott Moe, towards conservatism?
Partly. I mean, here's an interesting fact, and I didn't verify if it's true, but it was in a reputable newspaper, I think is where I read it. But in Saskatchewan, you pick up agriculture, mining, forestry, resource development, those kind of oil and gas, right? Those kind of jobs. Literally, it's less than or around 3% of the entire jobs in Saskatchewan. It's got, yeah, sure, everybody would like to be in that area because those are really high, well-paid jobs. Generally, if they're organized, they come with benefits and stuff. So yes, some people are pushing in that direction because either they're in that sector or they have friends or family, communities that rely on those jobs. And I think that's the one thing that perhaps the Greens and other parties haven't done a good enough job, is selling a job creation vision that says, look, we can move away from that kind of, intensive oil and gas and resource extraction towards sustainable initiatives. And we need to. I mean, from the Green perspective, it's a matter of time before things just really break down. I mean, we saw, was it Lytton, BC, and then it got worse in Jasper, right? It's a matter of time before, like, the worst thing would be, what if water resources start drying up? What if the air becomes so contaminated we can't even breathe it? I don't like.
Yeah.
I've tried to tell senior Green people, look, we need to dial that back a little bit. Like, we believe it, but selling that message that either you vote Green or you're all going to die, I think that just paralyzes people.
Yeah, that's not advantageous, especially if you're just a grassroots movement. It makes you look more fringe. So, in your view, maybe I'm oversimplifying it a bit, but it sounds to me like, in your view, is Saskatchewan's choice this time around more about values, or is it simply about wanting stability in what some feel are uncertain times?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Some political scientists said in Canada, from his studying of all the elections and stuff, it's not about, say in Saskatchewan, it wasn't, if the government was going to change, it wasn't about voting in a new party. It's more about voting out a government, right?
Yeah.
So in the case of Ontario, Doug Ford's talking about maybe going early in 2025. If Doug Ford loses his government, it won't be because the Liberals or NDP or Greens or whoever ran a better campaign. It will be because people had enough of Doug Ford. Who's the next person that could take him out, right? And then they may all en masse just vote for them. So sometimes that's good, right? A progressive leader, a progressive party, suddenly they get in, just like Tommy Douglas did, and they do a whole bunch of great programming. The problem is sometimes you get elected members because they just seat job, right? And the government just, hey, we got a government, but they don't care about fixing anything. They just care about taking over. Yeah. And then we as voters live with the results. So yeah, tough.
I've been thinking about two elections because it wasn't just Saskatchewan that went to the polls. It was British Columbia. Saskatchewan stayed with their very far-right party, but then we look over to BC and boom, a totally different story. David Eby NDP gets reelected. What do you think makes that stark contrast something that we see in reality?
Yeah, it could be because the further west you go, they're less conservative. It's almost like you'd have to have a political scientist or an analysis poll by poll. Like two of the ridings, the Greens managed to win, so they basically broke even, right? They had 2 seats going into it. Yeah. They came back with 2 seats, even though the leader lost theirs, and I heard there was a lot of gerrymandering, right? Yeah. So she had to run in almost a brand new seat, which, even if you're a high-profile leader, current MLA, it's tough, right? Depending on the vote count there, it may not actually basically turn out, which unfortunately it didn't for her. But yeah, BC, it actually really interesting. Maybe some of the conspiracy stuff. The BC, very sensitive to the environment. Even if you didn't vote Green, you might have thought, you know what, voting Conservative means you're just rejecting pretty much anything, right? Like the guy literally came out and said he's not sure if climate change is really caused by, human emissions. Yeah. So we shouldn't have to worry too much. So, subconsciously they might not have, some of the voters might not have been ready to vote Green, but they might have voted NDP just to keep the Conservatives out. Yeah. And luckily, it was the margin of victory where it was just enough seats to kind of maintain government. So, yeah.
Do you think BC's political shift or Saskatchewan's political shift is a sign of bigger changes that could be coming Canada-wide come 2025? Or do you think these are just regional quirks?
No, I think my friend always told me in provincial politics, at least in Saskatchewan, the vote change comes from the rural areas and then goes into the cities. We didn't quite see that this time, right? The NDP took the cities, the rural parts mostly stayed with the SAS party. But I think, to your question, I think every provincial election kind of resonates with other voters around the country. If certainly for voters that are political, right? You, me, others that are either in a party or actively watch politics, we kind of subconsciously add all this up, right? And sometimes vote. Yeah.
So as someone who used to be the leader of the Green Party, Naomi Hunter, if there's one thing from BC's NDP in their playbook that you could think that Naomi Hunter should take into hers, into her platform and for her next election, what do you think she should take notes of? What do you think could work for her in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, I'd have to study the NDP playbook, but I think one thing for sure, I think a solid economic development platform that could be costed out. I think we need to, like you talked about fringe parties. So even though we're able to run a full slate, literally we had, I think about four parties below us, like 7 parties all ran in the Saskatchewan election. But unfortunately, we were short 3 seats, but we along with the NDP and the SAS party were the only ones that could theoretically form government.
Yeah.
So all 4 other parties, they all ran seats, but even if they won every seat they ran in, it wasn't enough to form anything, right? They would basically upset the status quo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if we could be shown that we have a costed out platform and here's our economic development plan that could be feasibly work, and it's been basically rubber stamped by some economic think tank. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think also grassroots. I think really. I know this is me speaking as the ex-leader.
Yeah.
My campaign manager literally said, "Look, here's the difference. People that don't know you, have never shook your hand, never talked to you, they'll see your image, they'll see you're green, they're never going to vote for you. They'll be scared out of their minds. Anybody that might have been scared out of their minds seeing that image, but gets to talk to you for a few minutes or shakes your hand and has a conversation, they're likely to basically go the other way, or at least give you the benefit of the doubt, right? So it really is getting not only our leader, but all of our candidates out to press the flesh, to do the door knocking, to go to community events, to spread the awareness.
It's really interesting that you talk about economic platform. Something that I get into a lot of discussions about in general with a lot of people is the carbon tax, because, it's a polarizer for sure. You've got a strong environmental background, so where do you stand on the carbon tax? Is it a necessary tool, or does Canada need something different?
Yeah, you're putting me in the toughest spot any Green leader alive today probably will be in. But you know what? I'll go on record. This is probably official because you're probably the first media person that's asked this. I am as far as I know, again, I could be wrong, but I am the only former Green Party leader in the whole world that basically said, no, I'm not in favor of the carbon tax. And
really?
I actually have a screen grab. Yeah, I have a screen grab because I used to chat with the former Premier of Saskatchewan, the previous guy, Brad Wall. Yeah. And I basically tagged him because what happened was my campaign manager, before he came on board, he kind of said, look, I need to know one thing. And he wasn't aligned, right? He was a conservative type, but he basically had no party membership. Yeah. And he said to me, look, before I come help your campaign, I need to know where do you stand on the carbon tax. And I'm always a guy that studies both sides of the issue, whether it's nuclear, forestry, whatever. Yeah. Just to kind of try, because usually the answer isn't this way or that way. It's usually somewhere in the middle. And on the carbon tax, hearing all the pros and cons, he really convinced me, who's it really going to hurt the most? It's not going to hurt the rich. Literally, you could quadruple it. It won't hurt trillionaires and billionaires, even millionaires, right? It'll pinch them a little bit. Middle class, they can survive it. I mean, they don't like it. It's like extra taxation. Yeah. But the lower working class and the unemployed, they're still going to have to go through it. Yeah. And, the studies show that Trudeau has, tried to use it as a way to redistribute wealth and give those guys carbon rebates. The problem is it really has kind of thrown everything into kind of a bit of a turmoil, right? it's almost like too much change too fast.
Yeah.
And the businesses, I think, really, just like the car companies, they keep thinking they can just wait out all this, what they would probably call nonsense.
Yeah.
And hope for the best. But I mean, I'm starting to see some changes with GM, Ford. They're starting to, and European car companies, they're starting to try and catch up with Tesla. Like, it's hilarious, right? Like, here's a company that went from nothing to the largest electric car company, still, profitable and everything, right? And now the other car companies are starting to try and catch up, right? Chase them down. But in terms of carbon tax, here's my take, Will. I said, look, what would I do? If I was Premier of Saskatchewan, got elected in 2011, 2016, it's not like I don't believe carbon is a problem. The science says it's a problem. So what I would do using Premier power is to sit down with the business establishment and before that, use the bureaucrats to say, okay, find me where the largest carbon emissions are. Is it in agriculture? Is it oil and gas? Is it steel production? We have a giant steel making factory in Regina. Is it humans? Like, who's causing all this, right?
Yeah.
And once we have that data, sit down with those people, either citizens and community groups or business associations, and say, look, I'm a newly elected premier. I want to get reelected. Our government really wants to do a good job here.
Yeah.
It's all voluntary. Just have a discussion. It's like, what do you guys think? Do you think we can lower emissions by 30%? I'd like to go deeper, 50%. Like, we only got 4 years. Like, I know you guys are going to try and wait us out. I get it. We're a new government. You'll probably blow us away with donations to the other guys. But let me tell you, I want you to cooperate. And by giving out a lot of things like tax cuts, rebates, whatever, right, to get cooperation, and it'll be beneficial for everyone, we can go that route. Or you don't want to cooperate, you want to wait us out, it'll be a long wait because this is day one of a majority government, right? We'll squeeze you. And if you don't like that, maybe in the second term we'll nationalize you. like literally, right? I mean, year 3 comes around. Well, we squeeze you, we nationalize you, we're still not getting compliance. I don't know. We talk to the bureaucrats. What else can we do? We're desperate for re-election here, right? Like that's a scary thing, Will. I think people subconsciously, a lot of people in Saskatchewan, they come from war-torn countries. Yeah. My parents came from China during the revolution, the Cultural Revolution and stuff, right?
Really?
It's like they're scared of big government. So big government that actually helps people, that shouldn't scare anyone. But the weight of a large government that becomes tyrannical, I think that's what people are afraid of when they want to lean left, but they want kind of a balanced left, right? A community left. That's why I'm kind of an anarchist syndicalist.
I can speak to that directly. I remember when I was 14, I wasn't a social democrat. I am? Is that better?
There you go. I think I.
I think I. When I was 14, I wasn't a social democrat. I was more libertarian left, and I was convinced that the man was a problem. But then as I get older, I'm like, no, it's not the man that's the problem. It's who is the man. That's the main issue with those kinds of issues. And there are several issues several industries that should be nationalized, like healthcare, for example. But it seems like people aren't ready to talk about that. And environmental policies, they're always a tough sell when people feel like jobs are on the line. When union workers feel like jobs are on the line, middle class people. Do you see a path forward for policies that can bring green and growth together?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one we've been selling for close to 30 years now is this idea of a guaranteed livable income. So if you put in a guarantee, and literally those 3 words, right? It's guaranteed, so constitutionally guaranteed, and then you have to define who is it guaranteed towards, right? Do you include permanent residents, certainly citizens of Canada, right? But you can define that, and then livable. Yeah. Well, you got to define that too, right? I mean, how livable is livable? But I think we can get close to a good definition so that people aren't, suffering on a guaranteed income. And then income, right? It's basically, it's like an income, right? So if you don't have a job, we're still going to keep you alive. If you get a job, well, we're not going to just instantly yank it away. We'll still give you a top up, right? Until you move. Like, here's the irony, Will. You can look this up. I don't know if they pulled it down yet, because Pierre Poilievre's in charge. But I keep checking. The Conservative Party federally platform Andrew Scheer, who came from Saskatchewan, he wanted to one-up Trudeau on the Canada Emergency Benefit, right? The CERB, right? So he came up with his idea. Okay, so Trudeau, basically, if you earn $1, you'd get nothing. So his plan was, look, if you start earning $1,000 a month, well, we're still going to top you up by $1,000, and it basically tiered off until you started earning $6,000 a month. And I'm like, oh my God, he just decided to better guarantee the income.
It's really funny when these conservatives like to they really enjoy being against things like universal basic income, but in their argument against universal basic income, they inadvertently make the best case for universal basic income, or in this case, CERB. They always are. It's like they actually do agree with it, but they just are. It's like they're scared to say that they're in agreement of it because decades of propaganda have taught them to believe that that's socialism and that's a boogeyman word. No one wants to talk about if unregulated capitalism is a good thing for Canadian society and if it inherently oppresses the the middle class, the workers, anyone who is not rich.
Yeah. Well, I'll go one step further, Will. I thought about this. I think it's almost a form of social conservatism, right? They've been brought up that you work hard, you earn your way through, and you struggle, right? You just don't laze around, which is irony. Yeah. Because, right? Yeah, you probably already see this, right? It's like, well, who lazes around the most other than rich people, right?
Other than rich conservatives, especially. I'm sure you've noticed with Poilievre. The funny thing about Poilievre is he's a very pull your stuff up by the bootstraps kind of guy, but you compare him to someone like Jug Me Sing, for example. Say what you will about Jug Me Sing, but unlike any other federal party leader, at least to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, Jug Me Sing is an actual example of the Canadian dream embodied, and if he was Caucasian, people would love him a lot more because, he lived in his childhood with a history of his dad was an alcoholic, he had to raise his brother when he was a young adult, and he, despite all of the disadvantages Mr. Singh had, he ended up becoming a very successful lawyer and became the first Sikh man to lead a federal party. Compare that to Pierre Poilievre, where, yes, Pierre Poilievre was adopted. Yes, Pierre Poilievre was bullied in high school. But he didn't actually face real struggles. He was always well off. And as a member of parliament, he's done nothing but sit on his wazoo and collect a pension. But he wants to project that on to others. So,
exactly.
Vic, in your experience, is Saskatchewan ready to embrace serious environmental or social change, or is there just too much at stake for people?
Well, I think, I'm not sure what will be there's going to be a crossing point. Assuming I stay here for another 30 years and live that long, somewhere along the line, there's going to be somebody that breaks through, either from the past Green Party candidates or someone new. Like we almost need, we need a lot of luck, but we also need a combination of a leader that can really encapsulate change. Yeah. But also we need the conditions on the ground that people are tired of the two-party system. And it's close, right? We have the NDP very strong now in opposition. Yeah. If they can't push the government around, well, I don't know, here's the irony, Will. This is the birthplace of the CCF, right? They used to joke about how anybody who became the Saskatchewan NDP leader would eventually go on to become premier. Well, now we have 4 NDP leaders. Let's see, I'm trying to think if I can remember them all, but Cam Broughton, Dwayne Lingenfelter, Ryan Miley, and now Carla Beck. So 4 NDP leaders, they all failed to form government so far. I'm hoping my friend Carla sticks around because she's so close. I think if she can pull it together, they can do it. But I guess what I'm saying is, for the environmental thing, it may be the nuclear issue. Like, they're trying desperately. They'd be smart if they backed off, but they're trying desperately to wedge nuclear power into Saskatchewan. And the irony, again, Will, the irony is, they're using our crown monopoly, our Sask power monopoly, to do it, right? And it's just like, oh my God, you guys keep saying you're conservative, but you're using a socialist method to bring about power production.
Yeah.
Does nobody else see how stupid this is? But anyway.
Victor, I gotta say, I was curious. There's this one thing I've been curious about ever since you followed me back on X, and I've been even more curious about it, since this conversation started, getting, a hold of, what you believe. There's a few questions I want to ask you. I am sorry if they hurt your feelings. I'm not going to be outwardly mean, but I am sorry if they hurt your feelings in a way. So with all of that being said, in 2019 you made a big move. You ended up jumping from the Green Party, and you ended up running with the PPC. What was going through your mind when you decided to make that call? What pulled you into the PPC?
Definitely got no problem answering that question. So I'm all for a multi-party system.
Yeah.
I do not want to see us Canadians, Canada, become like the two-state solution in America, right?
Absolutely.
Republican, Democrats. I've always been in favor of electoral reform, specifically proportional representation.
Based.
So that entails a multi-party state, right? If you have two parties and you have a proportional system, you're still just trading off between red and blue or whatever you want to label them. And the last thing is, and this is pretty true, I mean, whether it was subconscious or even, basically forward, is the other side does it to the left, right? Splinter the left. Well, why don't we splinter the right? I mean, and to be fair, Will, having come to know some of the members of the PPC, they are a pure brand of conservatism. I don't love how they've morphed to become almost extreme right.
Yeah,
some of those rhetoric. Maxime Bernier, he just spews some really gross stuff.
Yeah, as someone who's talked to several PPC candidates, Vic, all fine people, but the PPC has kind of more so embraced this idea of being this cult of personality that, funds Maxime Bernier's lavish lifestyle, because all you got to do to really become a candidate at this point is toe the line for Bernier. They'll let average Joe off the sidewalk run if they can have an extra candidate on their roster. Even when you were running for the PPC, they were running candidates like Aidan Roy. He ran with the Liberals, who they were criticizing. You had Stephen Fletcher, who was a conservative candidate found guilty of fraud by Elections Canada, who Maxime was talking about how his old party was corrupt, but as soon as they need a candidate, push comes to shove, they allow this guy to run. So. Yeah, no,
I think you're right. I mean, I like to say that because I've been a member of all the major federal parties now, including PPC, and I like to still think there's good people, grassroots anyway. There's good people in all the parties. The problem is the party leadership and the trappings of power that surround that person, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, party leader aside, and splintering the right aside, looking back, what parts of the PPC platform do you think resonated with you the most? Because, there's other parties you could have ran with if the objective was splintering the right. There's the Christian Heritage Party, for example. At the time, there was the Canadian Nationalist Party. So, what part of the PPC platform resonated with you the most? Were there any values or policies that made you think, this is right for me, I want to be a part of this?
Yeah, I mean, and even today, there are points, and this might shock you, because, I think we're having a pretty great debate or free exchange of ideas and so on, right?
Yeah.
One thing he's really, the PPC, more than any party, including my party, the Greens, latched onto is the idea of freedom of choice on vaccines. And before I get attacked here, hopefully you'll let me have a few more minutes.
No. Speak.
Yeah. It's the idea that whether it's a COVID vaccine or it's another pandemic vaccine or any drug, if you don't feel comfortable, the question is, should a government, right? It could be a green government, right? Let's say there's an environmental pandemic, all right? The air is collapsing. We're trying to save lives. I want to inject you, buddy. And you say no. Does the government have a right to say, well, I'm going to save your life anyway, hold them down? Because I'll tell you, a friend of mine, she was terrified, right? She had allergies and stuff. She didn't want whatever they were going to put in her. And I said, look, you have a constitutional right to be safe. So they're not going to inject you, right? Don't worry about it. If they do, you can sue them, right? Literally, she came to school. She was working as a teaching assistant. She came to school, 3 teachers. I don't know if you know the term kettling, right?
I do.
You know, when the police, they kind of corner you and box you in.
Yeah, I know.
Well, these 3 teachers came out of nowhere when she got into the school, kettled her, and walked her, without touching her, walked her over to the gymnasium where the nurse, during COVID, had set up a pop-up stand. And the nurse said, "Oh, hi, Maria. Yes. We looked at the school records and we noticed that you haven't gotten your shot yet. Here, sit down." And the nurse gave her a gentle push. She fell into the chair. And then she basically quickly did the swab and stuff and jabbed her.
Really?
And then she called me in tears. I said, "Maria, this is the greatest thing." And she says, "What do you mean? I just got jabbed. I didn't want." And I said, look, you can sue. You can retire, right? She didn't do it. I would have done it.
That's crazy, man.
Right? Yeah. I mean, so the question is, have they proven that it was so serious that we had to basically inoculate everybody? I mean, the NDP here kind of went crazy too. The Ryan Miley, who I loosely call him a political friend, I guess. He came on December, would have been 2022 or 21, year-end interview, and he literally said, it is so serious, this COVID pandemic, we should be vaccinating children. And they said, children? He says, yes, children. 12, 13, 5, we should inoculate it. And it was just like, holy moly, dude. Like, have you thought about this? Have you read it? Like, nobody even knows, except if you're in the industry, nobody even knows what's in this stuff. And it did have a bad effect, right? Some of the stuff, like, I can't remember, was it Pfizer or the other one, Zeneca? I don't know, AstraZeneca. One of them, they removed, right? They just said, look, we're not going to use this. It's had too many side effects. And the real healthcare professionals, the scientists that have looked into the formulation, they said, look, the margin is so low. It's not even 2%. It's like something like 0.02.
Yeah.
But even at 0.02, you can't say, well, it has no effect.
Yeah.
Because they're literally, Will, you can trust me. I'm starting to sound like a conspiracy guy, but you can just go trolling on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Literally, there are ordinary Canadians. They're not Greens. They're not neo-Nazis. They're just ordinary people that don't care.
Yeah.
They were runners. They were athletes. They were physically healthy people, young and old. They are now crippled, right? Like they took the vaccine because they thought, in the best health decision, they want to protect them and themselves and their family. And they got the adverse effects. Now, again, it's a small group, but when the government tells you, don't worry, you're perfectly safe, no, man. It's just, so
coming from someone who actually got both COVID shots and has been boosted a few times with the COVID vaccine, to say that vaccine side effects never happen would be foolish, because with every vaccine, you will always have side effects. That is a, time-tested fact, and anyone who tells you otherwise is simply incorrect because, the data doesn't back that up. Would you say the PPC has a problem with over-relying on what some would characterize as fear posturing? Because it's 2024 and they're running like it's 2021 still, where they had that big surge in polling, because, it's 2024 and most Canadians do not actually care about things like vaccine mandates, for example, or the COVID vaccine side effects as a whole. It's kind of not in the news anymore. Would you say the PPC is over-reliant on that as an excuse to potentially not have a good platform?
Yeah, I think you're right, Will. I think, again, it's where the Greens, and I don't know federally where I've never been part of their platform development policy where they decide what are the key issues and so on. But as we talked earlier on, the PVC is going into the next election, again, doing fear mongering, right?
Yeah.
Where are your solutions? What are you going to do? Sure, they're going to give us all free guns. They're going to ban all immigration.
I mean, I feel bad for people I feel bad for any PPC candidates who actually legitimately feel like they're contributing to good social good, because you look at their platform and it's like they focus on fear posturing about trans people, specifically women, some of which being girls under the age of 18. They focus more on that than their economic platform, which is just, to my knowledge, non-existent. They care more about a 14-year-old girl who just wants to play fucking soccer. Pardon my language. She just wants to play soccer. They're more concerned about her right to play soccer with her gender than they are about whether people like me in Generation Z can afford to buy a home in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, this is the problem where, and I don't know if it is a problem, Will. I mean, let's say, again, coming back to, implementing proportional representation.
Yeah.
If we actually had a fair, and I mean, we need a whole bunch of electoral reform, right?
I agree.
We need to curb and ban union and corporate donations. We need to limit the amount of private fundraising, if any at all.
Absolutely.
We should go to public financing.
We should adopt Marianne Williamson's idea that she had in the 2024 Democrat primary, where she suggested that instead of campaign people using private funds, instead they would actually be able to use public dollars, so that way there's no conflict of interest. I believe that's the way it should be because, less corruption. Yes, proportional representation is something that I think the NDP has dropped the ball on. Singh got elected under the promise, as leader of the NDP under the promise of I support electoral reform, but he hasn't brought it up since 2017, which is really unfortunate.
I mean, again, I can tell you a story. Well, my son, who only voted recently, like last 6 years ago.
Yeah.
When he, I think one of the first or second times he voted, when Trudeau first got his mandate, I think 2019 or something like this, 2015, sorry.
Yeah,
2015, he promised electoral reform. And my kids singularly voted against the Greens, voted for electoral reform. He voted for Trudeau.
Yeah.
And then when Trudeau broke that promise, he literally said, I will never, ever in my lifetime vote Liberal again.
Good.
And I'm like, wow, like that's a pretty strong statement. Like he's political, but not hardcore, right? And I think that's the thing. I think Trudeau really let down not only, my generation, because I'm as old as him, but the younger generation. He could have been remembered
as one of the greatest prime ministers ever for bringing in electoral reform. He could have been put down in history under the likes of Brian Mulroney and his father, but he instead will just kind of sit there as kind of someone who wasn't as bad as Harper, but still wasn't that great. Talking about campaigns, yourself, Vic, thinking ahead, do you see yourself running with the PPC again? And if not, do you see any new horizons with running? Do you have any future plans in terms of running in an election period?
Yeah, just to let you know, I never did run for them. When they found out I was Victor Lau, that green guy, they actually had an emergency meeting.
Oh.
And gently asked me, so what are your plans exactly with being in our party? And
really?
I said, well, I assume to support you guys. And they said, well, we really would feel more comfortable knowing that you're, kind of holding side memberships with the Greens.
Yeah.
Maybe you could kind of, and I said, you'd prefer me to not be active. And they said, yeah.
I got to be honest, Vic, I actually looked into this rigorously before contacting you because I didn't want it to turn out to be like something that was triggering to you, but you're handling it like a good sport, and I do appreciate that. I looked it up. The only thing I have for a frame of reference is this picture of your Facebook page with the 2019 PPC logo as the banner, and out of context, it looks really funny. You got to admit that it looks really funny out of context, but
I should. I wonder if I did that or maybe someone else did that. But anyway,
I actually checked your social medias. There's no mention of the PPC, which from what you tell me, it lines up. Your candidacy was very short-lived, and it's surprising that they would actually. It's surprising that they'll let Stephen Fletcher run, but they won't let you run. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think they just found Will, we talked about some of the things that motivated me to be, in politics, right? Protecting the environment, stopping nuclear power, guaranteeing people an income. All of those things, I've tried to get the PPC on board because, okay, you say you're more fiscally conservative than the Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre. Would you end nuclear power? No word, nothing, zero, right? So I'm thinking, okay, so you guys would just subsidize nuclear just like everybody else except the Greens. Okay, well, fine. What about guaranteed income? You could just remove massive swaths of fat, lazy bureaucrats, as you call them, right? Just cut out all the fat and just pay everyone a guaranteed income. Doesn't that sound good? You hear crickets, right? You don't even hear crickets. You hear silence. Like, these guys talk a nice line about being libertarian and small government, but all they're about is getting power, and then they're going to hire their friends, just like most parties do. I mean, I don't think the Greens would be immune to that. Even I think that's what happens in politics.
The NDP ain't even immune to that. Trust me, the NDP is not immune to that. I think the PPC is the worst case of it, though, because, you know, the PPC is exactly why people think politics are a circus. And I'm not just talking about the out-of-context image of former Saskatchewan Green Party leader Victor Lau running with a party that's more libertarian right than, you know, socially and economically left-wing. I'm talking like the fact that Maxime Bernier is caught spending rigorous amount of money in Canadian dollars on waterfront villas in Florida, and it brings up the question of whether or not he's using campaign dollars or his own money, because, you know, he was a lawyer before being the leader of the before being a conservative MP.
He's
but
got his parliamentary pension, right? I mean, that's got to be huge.
Yeah, but it's not.
He had a good life. He still has a good life.
Yeah.
But I mean, if he's serious about getting elected, I think he'll have to have. I mean, either get PR in, or you know, really adjust the platform, right? I mean, it's just not palatable, thankfully, for most Canadians, right? Most Canadians just aren't that far right.
I mean, most Canadians, even if they are more farther right, most people just in general do not care about, you know, like going back to vaccine mandates, most people do not care about that issue anymore because they aren't in place right now. People will not care about that issue until it's in place again, which, whether it will be, it remains to be seen. Most people do not care about trans kids being a thing that exists authentically in public schools. Most people don't care about that. Most people, that doesn't bring people to the polls. People want a leader who's going to make the price of their food go down and make sure that they can afford to fuel up at the pump or have a job. And the PPC has not one tangible thing to deliver for that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Will. I think that's what I was advised when I was leader. It's like it always generally comes down to pocketbook issues, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense, basic survival. Which party? You know, they all know the government will be somewhat corrupt. I mean, especially at the federal level. But of course, there's always going to be a bit of leakage and stuff. They tolerate that kind of stuff.
And keep in mind, Vic, this is coming from someone who, you know, due to my own experiences, LGBTQ plus issues are like a top three for me personally. And if Jug Me Sing were to start trying to appeal to the transphobic demographic, I would immediately call him out on it, and I would not vote for him in 2025. And I would probably view him even worse than most people who call him sellout Sing do. Now, granted, most people don't feel that way because, pocket book issues. And Victor, one more question before we wrap this up. Reflecting on everything, has running with the PPC changed your perspective on Canadian politics? What was the big takeaway from that experience?
Well, again, I think there was really good people. The one guy that was organizing hard for him, I won't mention his name, but he's now a constituency assistant for my member of parliament. He's gotten himself in a bit of hot water because of his comments, but I think he's generally a good guy. He tries to do the right thing. I mean, again, you know, he told me one time, because I said, oh, yeah, you guys are having your conservative policy convention. Yeah. I said, that should be interesting because I've heard in the media there's some controversial policy. And he goes, Victor, you know how it is. Yeah. There's always going to be that kind of fringe policies, whether they get passed or not. Yeah. But you should know, you know, you can pass whatever you want at the policy level, grassroots and so on. But it's up to the center core of power, right? The leader and the key people around them, they will make, you know, the platform, right? And it's always a mystery who these people really are. Even, I guess as former leader, I had a lot of say. I certainly wanted, you know, I didn't want to campaign on something that was too far right or maybe potentially too far left. I don't know. I don't want a totalitarian government. My parents kind of ran from that kind of stuff, right? So it's kind of like, so the leader has a lot to say. The leaders, whoever they are, that trust, they pick the key issues. Yeah. And then the rest fall into place. That, I guess, because, you know, because I've been an NDP member and I never even got close. I don't know who does that, who goes through all the policy book. And I don't think sometimes they go through the policy book. I think they might pick a few policies to keep the members happy, but I think generally they look at the economy, they look at social programming. Yeah. What hasn't worked, like healthcare. Yeah. And they try and spend, write the platform to appeal to those areas, those demographics, that kind of thing.
Hey, Victor, thank you for taking the time to come onto the show and talk to me. It's been a real privilege to have you on and learn about all of this directly. Is there anything you'd like to say before you leave?
You know what? Thanks for having me. I love chatting politics. I have no problem with getting hit by hard issues and so on. I think in a democracy, that's the only way we can keep anybody in politics, certainly people that run for politics, honest, is to really ask the hard issues. And I think people like yourself do almost a better job than the journalists that are trained and actually are paid to interview politicians. Sometimes they just ask the soft questions instead of hard-hitting stuff. So I appreciate your time.
I try my best. I'll definitely be sure to interview you again in the future if there's ever a topic that comes up where your expertise would be needed, because there's a lot of things that you could comment on. Sure. But for now, you have a good night. I hope you have a good night, man.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot, Will. Take care, man.
See ya.
Cheers.